Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1068B, and today's date is September 6, 2016, and the title of the episode is Obama Provokes Russia with a Cyber War. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we've been watching the United States, and we've been tracking and watching, reporting on what they are doing out in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, the South Pacific, and we are watching the United States government, central bankers, NATO, bring in more military assets, more troops into these areas. And we've been tracking the United States government, central bankers, and how they are provoking other countries. They're continually doing this. And we can see right now that North Korea, they launched some ballistic missiles, which every country does. This is not unusual. And remember, the United States government central bankers, they don't like countries that have the ability to create their own nuclear weapons. They like countries that don't have nuclear weapons because they're easy to go in and remove the power structure, have regime change. And most of the time, the U.S. government central bankers, they stay away from those countries that are engaged in creating their own nuclear weapons. And we see that North Korea is one of those countries where they continually provoke, because they realize, and they're hoping, that the leader of North Korea does something stupid. Now, they launched ballistic missiles while the leaders were in the meeting of the G20, and Obama came out and said, how dare North Korea do this while the G20 is going on? So we are going to place more sanctions on North Korea, which doesn't help, because they placed all these sanctions on North Korea, and they're still testing. The United States government central bankers have used sanctions in Cuba. That didn't help. Actually, Obama even admitted it. Sanctions don't work. So why in the world would the United States be placing sanctions on these countries? It's because they want them to do something. They want them to lash out. And the more they squeeze them, the more they put them into the vice and they turn the vice, they're hoping that these countries will actually do something. Start a war. That's what they want. Actually, during the G20, Obama was out there and he was threatening China. Threatening China for sailing ships, having an island in the South China Sea. Now, remember, the United States is threatening a country in their body of water, which they share with other countries. The United States really has nothing to do with this. I know they use freedom of navigation, which the United States has never signed or ratified, but they keep saying that, they have the right to sail the ships because of the freedom of navigation. It's strange how they never signed that or ratified it, but they like to use it in the news. But the United States is in areas right now which it shouldn't be in. And it shouldn't be really talking about what's going on in that little area. It's like China sailing their ships to the Gulf of Mexico, sailing around that area. How would the United States react? The United States would come out and say, whoa, wait, what's going on here? They would bring out their ships. They'd bring out their planes. And they have every right to do so because China is very close to the United States. Well, this is what these countries are doing out throughout the rest of the world. Russia, where NATO is on its borders, Russia is saying, what's going on here? United States flying spy planes, bombers very close to Russia. Russia's going to launch their airplanes. The United States sailing ships very close to the Chinese islands, sailing through the South China Sea. China is going to react. This is what the United States wants. And we can see right now, Obama is out there saying that there's going to be consequences, that Beijing needs to back down in that area. Actually, it's the United States that needs to back down. I mean, we have another incident in Iran where we have another U.S. ship, which is in the Persian Gulf, the USS Firebolt. Again, the United States not sailing around its own country, sailing in international waters near other countries, and they're saying that all of a sudden an Iranian vessel sailed directly in front of the USS Firebolt. How dare they? Unprofessional. Most likely, like in every single other case, the United States sails very, very close to their waters. And these countries have every right to take their ships, their boats, and sail them up to what is approaching their waters. The United States would do the exact same thing. And we can see right now, the U.S. is doing this on purpose to provoke these countries, and they're going to continually do this. Now, when we see the United States accelerate the provocations around the world, we know we are getting very, very close to a war, because they're going to increase the level. And once they start doing this, we're already starting to see it, because this is the second story from Iran. This is like the 100th one from the South China Sea. We see Russian aggression, stories all the time about that. When they up this a notch, where we have maybe a firing of a missile, a firing of a cannon, or something like that, they are getting prepared and ready for war. Now, Turkey out in Syria, and we have to remember Turkey invaded Syria, they're calling for a 48-hour ceasefire around Aleppo. Now, why would they be calling for a ceasefire? Because we understand the United States government central bankers, the moderate rebels, they are losing their positions in this area. Russia, the Syrian army, they're making huge gains. We also understand that Turkey is setting up this safe zone in this area, which is right out near Aleppo. And we can see at this point, France is deploying artillery to Iraq and Syria right now. We know the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is on its way to this area. And they're going to be bringing a lot of artillery to the front line. And we can see right now that the coalition forces, they're getting prepared and ready to have this major offensive in this area. Now, of course, everyone believes it's against the Islamic State. The Islamic State is pretty much done with. They're the proxy army of the United States government central bankers. They really don't have that much of a hold in this area anymore. So we can see right now the United States and all the coalition forces don't need to be involved with this. The Iraqi forces, they would have the ability to destroy the rest of the Islamic State with no problem. Same thing with Russia and the Syrian army out in Syria. So what is the United States and all these other countries doing in Iraq, Syria, Libya? They're trying to maintain their puppet governments, and they're still trying to replace a government. That's their goal from the beginning. Now, it looks like the United States has trained a new Islamic State commander, former Tajikistan Special Forces Colonel Kalimov. He was trained in the United States by Blackwater. And we can see he has been promoted from within the Islamic State organization, and he is now named the new chief military commander for the global terror group. You can see right now that they're playing this up because, again, when we look at the entire situation, the leader of the Islamic State was killed. Russia and the United States were going back and forth of who killed the leader. Well, we know it was the United States. But we can see right now that this new individual who is trained by the U.S., by Blackwater, a private organization, we can see at this point they're still trying to use the Islamic State right now. And he actually put out a message where he said, "Listen, you American pigs, I've been 3 times to America, and I saw how you train fighters to kill Muslims. God willing, I will come with this weapon to your cities, your homes, and we will kill you." Now, again, this is propaganda. We know once this event occurs here in the United States, it's going to be an inside job. It's not going to be the Islamic State. Of course, they're going to use the story, maybe, that it is the Islamic State, but we can see right now the Islamic State really has no hold on it. Maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't. But whatever they do, we know they're going to create this event, create this narrative, and they're going to make people believe that this is actually how it is happening. But we know that this is going to be an inside job. We know they need to do this because the economy is collapsing. And we see that the United States government central bankers, they always stick to their goal. I mean, think about how long they've been in Syria trying to get rid of Assad. But we can see with Turkey right now that the U.S., they are moving towards Plan B. And it looks like they're trying to carve out and separate Syria right now. And we know at this point, the coalition forces like France, the UK, and many other, they're bringing in more hardware into this area. We know the bases have been built in Syria. Turkey's already looking for a safe zone, no bomb zone, no fly zone, exclusive zone. And we can see the beginning stages are already there. The U.S. already told Russia and Syria that this is a no-bomb area over the moderate rebels. So we can see they're already working towards this goal. Because the U.S. never gives up. They have to remove Assad. But when all of this fails, when all of this doesn't work, they need to provoke a war. Because their plan was to get into Sudan, get into Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Syria, then move into Iran. And if you noticed during the P5+1, what the United States has done, it has made sure that Iran was not a nuclear power with a nuclear weapon. Now, in the beginning stages, they wanted Iran to work with the United States to sell their oil using the dollar. And Iran said, no, we're not going to do this. Now, the United States government central bankers, they kind of knew that this was going to happen. But the most important thing to take away from this is they were making sure through this process that they were not a nuclear power. So when the time comes, if they can remove Assad, take control of Syria, we know eventually they're going to make their move into Iran. Now, we can see at this point that they thought they were going to have this complete about 8 years ago. And here we are in 2016. So what do they have left? Well, they have nothing left. All they have is war. Because when we look at the economy, we look at what the ECB is doing, the Bank of Japan. I mean, think about this. They're buying up everything. They're taking worthless paper and they're purchasing hard assets. Here in the United States, the Fed, what did they do? They bought up all the toxic real estate. Now they have trillions of dollars of real estate on their books. They're the owners. We see Bank of Japan, ECB, purchasing corporate bonds, purchasing equities. They're buying everything up to be in total control of the system. At the same time, trying to keep the system propped up. So what do they have left? Well, they can go negative interest rates. They can use helicopter money. They can pass the hot potato around to other banks with quantitative easing. But to increase the quantitative easing, they need to have some type of economic shock. They need to show why they need to do this. Because if they just come out of the blue and say, listen, we need to implement QE 97 with about 4 trillion each year, people are going to say, why do we need this? Because we've been told that the economy is doing well. Why do we have to create more money out of thin air? The story doesn't hold water. But if they can say the economy was shocked in some way, then they can make their case. Now, Obama, when he was out at the G20, he kind of threatened Russia with cyber war. Obama hurled a threat to Putin, saying, look, we're moving into a new era here where a number of countries have significant capacity, and frankly, we've got more capacity than anybody, both offensively and defensively. And he's talking about a cyber attack. Now, we know they're trying to blame Russia on cyber attacking the voting system. And we can see right now that Obama is laying the groundwork right now to make everyone believe that this cyber attack might come from Russia. Another one. Now, why would he want to do this during a G20? Why would he threaten another country with this? Why would he even mention it? Because he wants the world to know that when the financial system here in the United States comes down, that it's going to be Russia who has done it. Think about this. We've been getting all this information about how China, North Korea, Russia, they've been cyber attacking. Now, NATO, the United States, if we are cyber attacked, it's an act of war. They're already trying to make the case that Russia is cyber attacking the voting systems. We know that if there is a shock to the system, the Fed just so happened to put out a report that they're going to use QE once again. And what this tells us is that they're preparing to have a shock to the system, which means they're preparing for Russia, maybe North Korea, might even be China, to do something to the power grid, to the financial institutions, to do something very small. It's all they need. It doesn't have to be a large attack. Something small where one bank gets hit has a cascading effect. ATMs for that bank go down, and it makes the news. Now, other banks, they become nervous. Then you hear the stories flying around that they're getting hit too. We better shut down our systems because we're a little nervous. We're not sure if we're protected enough. If you notice, all the stories in the last couple of years, they've been saying the same thing, that the banks are not protected. They don't have the correct infrastructure in place to protect them against a cyber attack. So they will use this, even though they've never been cyber attacked, to shut down the banking system. And once the banks are shut down, people won't be able to get their funds out of the bank. The one bank that was allegedly hit most likely will be some type of malware that was planted, detected, and then had the scare process move forward. So the financial institutions will be all shut down. They'll be frozen, even though nothing even really happened. The U.S. government, the central bankers, will be out there explaining why this has happened, why the system has to be down right now, that it might affect the economy here in the U.S. They'll continually tell you that it's strong, but there might be problems when we turn the systems back on. This will allow them and give them time to do whatever they need to do. Most likely this will happen on a Friday. They'll go into the systems, siphon off some money, make it look like that something terrible has happened, point the finger in less than 48 hours at Russia, and then you'll hear the cry for war. You'll hear the cry from the U.S. government, central bankers, the corporate media, that something must be done. This is an act of war hitting our financial institutions. It might even be followed up with some type of attack on the power infrastructure. So we can see that they're preparing and getting ready. And they need to show how this is going to play out and what country is going to be responsible. Because they always have this ready to go when this hits. And we can see they're getting prepared because time is running out. The clock is ticking down. And if they wait any longer, they will not be able to control the system coming down. The system most likely will come down without them. And they don't want this to happen because then they lose the narrative. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.